Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is the fourth chapter of the book that we were talking about. And in this chapter, we are going to be talking about the establishment of the Muslim state, in which the author goes into the Umayyad period and then the start of Abbasid revolt and then their coming to power. So let's start this chapter. So, first off, the nature of Muslim government and society fundamentally changed during the 19 years of Muawiyah's rule from 661 to 680. And also keep in mind that the rule of Umayyads starts from 661 and it continues till 750. So it's about like 91 years or something. And this like show you, okay, like this is the area. This is the like time period we are going to be talking about when it comes to Umayyads. And in that we also have like another caliphate, but we will talk about that later. So coming to power at a time when disunity and chaos reigned from Egypt to Iran, Muawiyah's political skill and competence helped prevent the Muslim world from falling into total anarchy. At the same time, some of his policies and actions were controversial and formed the basis for some of the biggest divisions in the Muslim world today. His reign marked the beginning of the Umayyad Caliphate, when succession to the position became hereditary and stayed in the Umayyad family until 750 CE. The last years of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu's caliphate were marked by de facto division between the realms of Muawiyah and Ali. De facto means like it was the division, but it was not like official division. With the death of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu, however, Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu was free to reunify the Muslim world under his command. He was incredibly popular in Syria, and Syrian army formed the backbone of his military. He was not without enemies, however, particularly in Iraq, where continued opinion was in favor of the caliphate being inherited by Ali's son Hassan radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He negotiated a deal with Ali's son in which Hassan radiallahu ta'ala anhu would give up any claim to leadership and retire to a life of worship and scholarship in Mecca. In many ways, Muawiyah ruled like an Arab tribal leader from pre-Islamic Arabia. So Muawiyah began to change the caliphate into something new, a monarchy. He was the first caliph to sit on a throne and first to pray in an enclosed area in the mosque. Royalty and court culture became a part of the caliphate as it had been part of the Roman and Sassanid empires. He would walk in the markets of Damascus in his badged clothing, as enormous and elaborate mosques were built by his architects. Then we have the siege of Constantinople. So Muawiyah chose to focus on expanding the borders of the caliphate. Muawiyah sent armies to continue the war against the Byzantine Empire by land and sea. The Muslim armies were for the first time able to lay siege of the Byzantine capital of Constantinople. The legendary city had been a prize since the earliest days of Islam, when the Prophet promised that eventually a Muslim army would conquer that distant and seemingly impenetrable city. From 674 to 678, the Umayyad armies laid siege to city's massive walls but lacked the manpower or technology to conquer the city. So this is the Constantinople city. You can see on the map. These are the walls, which are like the stored walls, which stopped the Muslim army, and these are the restored section of the fortifications or the walls. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari. Among the casualties of the siege was the elderly Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu ta'ala, a notable companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was buried under the walls of Constantinople, and almost 800 years later would become a mythic legend for the Ottoman armies that eventually managed to overcome Constantinople's walls. This is the tomb of Abu Ayyub al-Ansari in Turkey. And this is like the Muslim invasion of Maghreb. It shows how Muslims moved into Maghreb. Maghreb is called the African Western African part. It's called Maghreb. So this is what we are going to be talking about now. Caravan, city of Caravan. So the expansion also continued in North Africa, where the Byzantines still had control west of modern Libya. The fringes of Umayyad-controlled land west of Egypt were governed by Uqba ibn Nafi. In 670 CE, he was ordered to advance into Byzantine Africa in conjunction with the ongoing advances into Byzantine territory in the Aegean. Because of the Byzantine preoccupation with other fronts, Uqba was able to advance unchallenged into modern Tunisia, where he established the garrison city of Kairouan. The main threat ended up not being the Byzantine forces but the local Berbers, who had to be slowly subdued before any more advances toward the west could be embarked upon. So, this is the conquest of Maghreb or Tunisia in 47 Hijri. After leaving Caravan in 680 CE, Uqba's army marched generally unopposed through the desert plateau south of the coastal mountain ranges that run along the Mediterranean. Advancing from one Byzantine outpost to the next, Uqba's army was able to quickly annex hundreds of kilometers of territory along the coast with relative ease. Then we have conflict of succession. So, one possible explanation for this seemingly miraculous conquest was linguistic, cultural, and religious division between the Berbers of North Africa and the Byzantine rulers. So I think I just made a mistake of this like conflict of succession. It is, I think, the first and next slide. So okay, the Berbers were our desert people closer to the Arab nomads who arrived in the 600s than the urban Latins and Greeks who had administrated the area for centuries. Religion, however, seems to be a larger factor that led to Berber support for the Arab Muslim armies. Early Islamic accounts speak of entire tribes of Berbers converting to Islam immediately upon arrival. Thus, it was possible for Uqba's army to continue gaining momentum as it did through the early 680s until they were able to push into modern Morocco and to the shores of the Atlantic. Yeah, this is now the actual slide of conflict of succession. So Muawiyah appointed his son Yazid as his successor well before his own death and demanded oaths of allegiance from the notables of Damascus. However, keeping in mind the historical context of Muawiyah's time makes it easier to understand why the switch to a hereditary system made sense. Muawiyah's time as caliph showed the emphasis he placed on political unity and harmony. However, the choice of Yazid was not without controversy. Unlike his father, he had never known the Prophet and was thus without the aura that comes with being a companion. Furthermore, rumors swirled in the holy cities of Makkah and Medina of sinful life that Yazid led. Whether or not these allegiance of wickedness were accurate, they were enough for some to revolt, such as Abdullah ibn al-Zubair, the son of Zubair radiallahu ta'ala, who opposed Ali radiallahu ta'ala. Hussein radiallahu ta'ala. Compounding the problem were the desires of some in Iraq to see the descendant of Ali radiallahu ta'ala take the title of Caliph of the Muslim world. Ali's oldest son Hassan radiallahu ta'ala had already died in Makkah during Muawiyah's reign, so support fell to his younger brother Hussein radiallahu ta'ala. This grandson of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was attracted to the city of Kufa in Mesopotamia by promises of support from its people. Against the advice of Abdullah ibn al-Zubair, Hussein radiallahu ta'ala set out to establish a base in Iraq in 680 from which he could oppose the Syrian Umayyads. True to Abdullah's prediction, the people of Kufa abandoned their support for Hussein before he even arrived. Yazid had already sent a new governor to the city to root out any opposition and ensure that the population does not rise up in revolt against him. Karbala. Hussein radiallahu ta'ala had been counting on that support and only traveled with about 70 family members and friends. At the plain of Karbala, about 80 kilometers north of Kufa, Hussein radiallahu ta'ala was surrounded by Yazid forces. After the killing of Hussein radiallahu ta'ala, popular support throughout the Muslim world was against the Umayyad government. So this is the location of Karbala in the modern day Iraq borders, you can see. Then we have Abdullah ibn al-Zubair. Abdullah used this opposition to Yazid to bolster his own revolt against the Umayyads, which he declared in Makkah in 680 after Hussein's death. So now we have two caliphate running in the whole empire, whole world of Muslims. So we have the Umayyads, and then we have Abdullah ibn al-Zubair. So he is going to be there for some time. Yazid was never able to do away with the revolt in the Hijaz and died in 683 without complete control over the empire. After Yazid's death, it seems that Umayyad control collapsed almost everywhere in the Muslim world. Abdullah declared himself caliph and was given oaths of allegiance by people in Iraq, Egypt, and even the fringes of Syria itself. Under Marwan and his son Abdul Malik, the Umayyads regained control of Syria, Egypt, and Iraq and eventually stamped out Abdullah ibn Zubair rebellion in Makkah by 692. in the late 600s and early 700s, the Umayyad continued the second period of rapid military expansion. Abdul Malik sent armies to conquer Carthage, which is a city in Tunisia, the final outpost of Byzantine control in North Africa in 698 CE. The former rulers of the land were forced to retreat to Sicily and Greece. Then we have Al Andalus. So Musa ibn Nusayr, the Umayyad governor of Maghrib, sent a force under the command of Tariq ibn Ziyad, a Berber convert to Islam, who in early 711 landed near a giant monolithic promontory on the south shore of Spain. He established his camp near the mountain which became known as Jabal Tariq, which is known as Gibraltar. From this base, Tariq led raiding parties throughout the south of Spain, which proved to be generally successful, especially since Roderick and the main bulk of the Visigothic army was in the north of Peninsula dealing with a based rebellion. So they were busy there, and the Turkic army went into Spain. And after that, by the time that Roderick was able to march his army south to meet the Muslim forces in the summer of 711 CE, Tariq had managed to bring over an army that numbered around 10,000 soldiers from Muslim North Africa. And this is the map in Arabic. You can see the Tariq was in Tanja. You can see in the south. So he was there in Tanja, and there was also the city of Caravan. Then from there he moved, and as you can see, the green line of Tariq and red line is of Musa ibn Nusayr. This is Jabal Tariq, or as it is called, Gibraltar. Then we have the conquest of Al-Andalus. At the decisive battle of Guadalete, Tariq's army crushed the amassed forces of Roderick. So Roderick himself was killed in the battle. Central control collapsed throughout the peninsula. Tariq advanced to take Roderick's old capital city of Toledo within a few months of the battle, and soon afterwards, cities began to fall one by one to the invading Muslims. As expeditionary forces under Tariq took cities as far north as the Ebro Valley, Musa's larger army followed up to fully establish Muslim rule in conquered areas and set up civil government. In the years from 711 to 715, Tariq and Musa managed to bring the vast majority of peninsula under Umayyad control. This again, the map showing the advancement of Tariq ibn Ziyad and Musa ibn Nusayr, and you can see it in more detail by stopping the video, or you can even go to the main book, Atlas of the Islamic Conquest, which I have referred many times before. Gaul. So further raids to the north into the Gaul initially proved to be as successful as the conquest of Spain. So they are moving more northwards. So the Muslim armies managed to advance into the south of modern France, establishing their rule in Aquitaine and Septimania in the 720s. The climax of the Muslim invasion of Gaul was in 732, when armies under the Muslim governor of Al-Andalus, Abdurrahman al-Ghafiqi, were defeated by the Franks under Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours in northern France. So this was like the end of further advancement into the Europe. This is the map of Gaul in the time of Caesar. So it is just to show you the Aquitania and where is the Gaul. It is in the north of Spain. Then we have, at the same time, Muhammad ibn Qasim. Simultaneously, on the opposite side of the empire, Umayyad armies were marching into an unknown land into which even Alexander's armies dared not venture. The impetus was a Muslim trade vessel returning from Ceylon, or modern day Sri Lanka, that was attacked by pirates based in the northwest corner of India, Sindh. When the king of Sindh, Raja Dahir, refused to return the Muslim captives taken from the ship, Umayyad armies were again spurred to take action to push the empire's border even further. Under the command of Muhammad bin Qasim, a young man who hailed from the tribe of Saqif based in Taif, he was sent with an army of 6,000 Syrian soldiers across Persia and into the Indian subcontinent in 711, the same year as Tariq ibn Ziyad's foray into Spain. So the empire is expanding from both sides, so in the east and in the west. This is where the Sri Lanka is, and they were turning from here into back into to their home, and then they were captured. And this is the campaign of Muhammad bin Qasim This is, as you can see, the way. And then the main part that he conquered was mostly like the Pakistan area and some of like modern day India area. Upon reaching the Indus River, several small communities capitulated to the invading force once given the promise of religious freedom. When Bin Qasim's force initially finally met Dahir in battle along the Indus River, the Muslims managed to inflict a devastating blow on the Sindhi army. Dahir himself was killed in the chaos of the battle. Like in Spain, the loss of a major battle and the death of the king led to the complete collapse of local government. Muhammad bin Qasim's forces mobbed up the remaining organized opposition within months and established Muslim rule in Sindh. For the first time, a part of India was under Muslim control. And this is the map showing the expansion during Prophet Muhammad and the Rashidun Caliphate, and then the Umayyad dynasty, which is kind of accurate. I don't know for sure how much accurate is it is. Then we have Zakat and Jizya, which is, the rapid expansion meant that a huge number of people came under Muslim control who were not Muslims themselves. The percent of population that was a Muslim in the early to mid 700s is estimated to be around just 10%. The rest being a blend of Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, Buddhists, and Hindus. According to Islamic law, these groups were granted religious freedom and were exempt from military service. So they were like not they do not have to be in the military. If they want to be, they could, and then they would be paid in the return. So they were exempt from military service in exchange for payment of a poll tax, which is the jizya. Muslims, on the other hand, were only subject to a land tax and the zakat, which is a mandatory tax meant to be distributed to the poor. Although the jizya was usually lower than the pre-Islamic taxes of Byzantines or Sassanids, it was still higher than the taxes paid by the Muslims. So, the naturally economic reaction to this system would be for non-Muslims to convert to Islam in order to pay less tax. But this solution posed a problem for the Umayyad government. If all the non-Muslims in the empire converted to Islam, it would lead a huge fall in tax revenue. Consequently, a safeguard to protect revenue was put into place. Non-Muslims who converted to Islam were required to continue to pay the same jizya tax they had paid before their conversion. It meant institutionalized discrimination based on race, since the Arabs had almost entirely converted to Islam before the Umayyad Caliphate began. The intention of the Umayyad may have been to protect their tax base, but the policy ended up having a racial aspect, keeping non-Arabs at the bottom of the society while Arabs rose to the top. This directly contradicted Prophet Muhammad's call for unity during the farewell pilgrimage. Then we have Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. An attempt was made by the Caliph Umar ibn Abdul Aziz to undo the un-Islamic taxation policy during his reign from 717 to 720 CE. He was distrusted by his own family for his views of equality and was poisoned by the Umayyad clan just 2 years after taking power. Later Muslims would give him the title of Umar II, the honorary title of the fifth rightly guided caliph. With ever increasing numbers of non-Arabs accepting Islam, dissatisfaction at the unequal tax policy of the Umayyads grew. Riding this wave of discontent, an other old family of Makkah rose to take control of the caliphate for themselves, the Abbasids. So the Abbasids take their name from the uncle of the Prophet Abbas. Sometimes in the early 700s, they began to circulate a rumor that one of the descendants of Ali had officially transferred the right to rule the Abbasids. From a practical standpoint, it gave legitimacy to the Abbasids from their base in southern Syria and later in Iraq. They sent agents east to Khorasan, where the Persian population could be counted on to support a revolt against the oppressive Umayyads. Throughout the 730s and 740s, oaths of allegiance and networks of allies were formulated far from the Umayyad base in Damascus. With promises of a more equal society under their caliphate and vague assurances that the descendants of Ali would play a greater role in the Muslim government, the Abbasids were able to secure backing from a wide spectrum of society. So this is the area of Khorasan, which covers modern day Iran, Afghanistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and some other parts. And you gotta keep this map in mind because this part is very important. Then we have further progress. In 747, the Abbasids formally declared their open revolt, unfurling their distinctive black banners in the skies above the city of Merv, in the far east of Muslim world in modern day Turkmenistan. The revolutionaries were led by a mysterious figure known as Abu Muslim. Not much is known about him. Under his brilliant political and military leadership, the Abbasid revolution quickly secured control of Khorasan, which was soon to serve as a base for the movement. Kufa, ever a hub of anti-Umayyad sentiment, rose up against its Umayyad governor and expelled him when the black Abbasid banners appeared on the eastern horizon. Once Kufa was liberated, former oaths of allegiance could be given to the Abbasid claimant to the Caliphate Abu al-Abbas. So this is the location of Merv in modern-day Turkmenistan. Then we have Battle of Zab, which is the decisive battle between Umayyads and Abbasids. So everywhere, the Umayyads were on the decisive as more people flocked to support the Abbasids. Meanwhile, rousing the Umayyad supporters proved to be a challenge. By the time Umayyad Caliph Marwan II could muster together the Umayyad forces, the Abbasids had already taken control of the majority of Iraq. In early 750, at the climactic battle of Zab in central Mesopotamia, the Abbasid forces completely routed the Umayyad army. Now, nothing stood between the Abbasids and Umayyad capital, Damascus. One by one, cities capitulated and accepted Abbasid sovereignty, and one by one, members of the Umayyad family were hunted down and executed. Marwan himself was captured in Egypt. Only one member of the defeated family managed to escape the revolutionaries. The teenage Abd al-Rahman, a relatively obscure member of Umayyad family, found a way to escape in disguise to North Africa. Pursued by Abbasid armies from Palestine to Egypt to the Maghreb, and aided only by a slave who had once worked for his family, his legendary journey led him eventually to Al-Andalus, where he could establish an Umayyad emirate far from Abbasid reach that would last almost 300 more years. Then we have the Abbasid Caliphate. So the revolt was based on the ideas of building a government more in line with prophetic ideals. Once the Abbasids were in power, however, the reality of their caliphate fell far short of expectation. The revolution did not mean a return of the era of rightly guided caliphs, where piety and not politics dictated the decisions of the caliph. If anything, the Abbasid caliph continued the same authoritarian traditions that they had denounced the Umayyads for. The one area where the Abbasids made real progress was the role of non-Arabs in society. Although the caliphate itself remained in Arab hands, administration was increasingly Persianized. Baghdad. Recognizing the usefulness of the Persians caused the Abbasids to move the capital of the Muslim world closer to the Persian heartland. The second Abbasid Caliph Al-Mansur established a new city to serve as his capital in the fertile plain between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in 765 CE near the old Persian capital of Ctesiphon. Within 20 years, Baghdad became the largest city in the world with over 1 million residents. The seat of the Muslim Empire would become a metropolitan center where government, culture, science, and art would all intersect. And this is the location of Baghdad in modern day Iraq. And this is the plan of Baghdad between 767 and 912 CE, according to William Muir. This is the Tigris River in Baghdad. The Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid was known for his immense wealth and diplomatic relations with distant states. In 802 CE, he sent an embassy to Charlemagne in France that included an elephant and a water clock. And this is the romantic depiction of Harun receiving a Frankish delegation. Outward expansion essentially halted when the Abbasids came to power. Seasonal raids across the border with the Byzantines remained, but the campaigns were generally indecisive. In the West, the Battle of Tours in 732 in the Umayyad times meant the end of the Muslim expansion into Europe. So the era of Muslim military conquest was over for the time being. Instead, the era of Muslim intellectual conquest was about to begin. And that is what we are going to be talking about in the next chapter or the next lecture of this book, which is about the intellectual golden ages. And after that, we have the chapter about the Islamic sciences, which we would be talking about. And then we would again come to these battles and stuff.